Right now across the country, pond fishing is going down, and whether you've experienced it or not, the fish are biting on something. Whether it's full-blown spring for you guys that live up north, or it is early summer to midsummer for us that live down south, the fish are biting on some lure. So in today's video, I'm gonna talk about the good lures and the bad lures, the good techniques and the bad techniques. That way you guys can catch more fish and be better pond anglers this summer. My name's Tyler, and let's talk about it. Another giant, another giant. Look at that, y'all. I can't believe what I just caught. Yes! Well, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to TRF. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by the tackle links in the video description. One of the biggest ways that you guys can easily help support this channel is by clicking the links down in the video description to get to Tackle Warehouse before you make your cart. You can add whatever in your cart, a crankbait, a vibrating jig, a trolling motor. Literally any size purchase helps, and you don't even have to buy the product that you clicked on. It just gets you into the website. But enough yapping. I've got some awesome lures to talk about to help you guys catch more fish during this time of the year in ponds. Let's get started with lure category number one, and that is Topwaters. Now, as I pick up my Topwaters, I want to give one quick disclaimer that applies to all the categories we're going to talk about in today's video, and that is that if you fish a pond or ponds that are very clean bottom, clear water to stained water, and there's not a whole lot of stuff to get your lure snagged on the bottom or in the water column, you can basically, during this time of the year, the post-spawn to early to midsummer time period, you can catch fish on just about every lure category. Topwaters, crankbaits, soft plastics, swim baits, whatever, you name it, you can fish it. But a lot of us have limitations, and that's why I have these categories, and that's why I'm gonna recommend certain ones over others. Let's jump into it. I'm gonna put these two down and talk about this one right here first, being the topwater frog. Now, the reason why I say this is my favorite topwater for this time of the year in pond fishing, bank fishing scenarios, is because it is the most weedless. A buzzbait is weedless, but it's nowhere near as weedless as a topwater hollow belly frog. And the reason is because the hooks are on the top of the frog. So you can skip it underneath a dock, you can put it over a bunch of grass on top of the water, lily pads, sticks and trees and laydowns. The frog works well around all that. Matter of fact, it works better than any other topwater. But the number one reason I'm gonna say the frog works best during this time of the year as opposed to every other topwater is because of what I call snot grass. I believe the scientific term is filamentous algae. It is stuff that grows in almost all of our ponds across the country. I am sure you know what I'm talking about, and it's probably the bane of your existence. All the lures with treble hooks and without treble hooks get this stuff all over, and I'm not saying the fish won't bite if it has that kind of algae on it, but they're a whole lot less likely to, and I've seen that time and time again. You want a good, clean presentation, and that algae, that snot grass, is no bueno. And these topwaters here, the treble hooked hard baits, absolutely are not the best topwaters for those locations. A popping frog and a normal frog, a hollow belly, are the way to go if you have that in your pond. Now, I understand there are some difficulties with fishing and catching fish on a topwater hollow belly frog when it comes to where to throw it, how to walk the dog, where it kind of goes back and forth, back to you, and of course the bite, hook set, and landing can be tough for a lot of anglers just beginning on a frog. And I've got tons of videos to help you. You can search Tyler's Real Fishing Frog in the YouTube search bar, and I'll also link some instructional frog videos down in the video description if y'all want to watch. Not only do I recommend the frog for this time of year, in a lot of our ponds it's kind of a necessity. It's the only topwater we can throw, and sometimes it's the only lure we can throw if everything in casting distance is just covered in snot grass or vegetation. But I did say there's going to be some exceptions, and that is for really open water. So if you fish a pond like the one that I'll put the drone shot here right now, it has no aquatic vegetation on the shore, and they still bite topwater. So can you throw a frog? Absolutely. But your hookup ratio, 99 out of 100 times, maybe 100 out of 100 times, is going to be better on a treble hooked topwater. And my two favorites for this time of the year, again, the post spawn to summertime, is going to be a walking topwater bait and a plopper style bait. These can really be used interchangeably. You kind of have to find out what the fish on your body of water want. I think if I'm going to fish more target oriented, so I'm casting at a specific rock pile, a grass clump, a lay down log, I'm going to throw the walking bait, because with the right retrieve, I can keep it relatively in one place, not as much as a frog, but the retrieve is not as quick back to you. With a flopper style, it is a straight retrieve or a chop back to you, and there's no side-to-side action. So if you want to cover a whole lot of water, what I mean by that is as you're walking the bank, doing a quick loop around your pond, and you have open water, maybe a little bit of wind, especially overcast conditions, a topwater plopper style. This here is the Mach Patroller 110, my favorite plopper style, and one of my favorite colors as well if you have bluegill eating bass in your pond. And these two baits right here really excel when it comes to stained to clear water. I catch fish on a frog in clear water, but the frog for me is really stained to dirty water, and especially that kind of water clarity around shallow cover and grass. So tons of topwaters can work. If you want to throw a popper or a chug bug or a what's the one I used 100 ponds recently? The jitterbug. You can use whatever. Buzz baits, I don't use as often because they sink, and if I want the opportunity to stop the top water in place next to structure, I want to have an air-filled body to let it sit there on top, and buzzbait you can't. Have I caught them on a buzzbait this time of year? I have. That is why I put the disclaimer earlier on in the video. Almost every lure can work this time of year. I'm just giving you what I think is best for ponds and bank fishing in my experience, and I've fished ponds in 15 states, I think at this point, in lakes in tons of other states, and so I've seen tons of situations. You can trust what I'm saying. So that's enough talk about topwaters. Let's move on to category number 2 for ponds this time of year, and that is soft plastics. And once again, so many different soft plastics could work. Do you want to throw a creature bait? Fantastic. You want to throw a worm? Great. You want to throw a fluke style, swim bait, whatever. They can all work. But here are my favorite ones in the situations in which I throw them. Now, if you've watched 100 ponds in the last, again, my series where I fish 100 ponds, kind of self-explanatory. I don't think there's a better soft plastic and a better rigging of that soft plastic during this time of the year from the bank than a 6-inch Strike King Ocho. Now, you may think 6-inch. That seems a little big. Maybe I'll go with a 4 or 5, and I love a wacky rig. Forget about a Texas rig. I'm just telling you, from my experience all across the country, there's almost no better bite getter than this thing on a Texas rig. It still kind of glides down to the bottom, has a little bit of a shimmy, but I think the hook set ratio, or the hookup ratio, is way better on a Texas rig on this big of a worm than on a wacky rig. The 4 3/4 inch Mach stick is going to be my wacky rig one, but I just think if you want to catch small fish and larger than average size fish, again, a small one will eat a 6-inch Ocho, you should throw this lure. Now, when the water gets a little bit warmer and the fish really get out deep, I switch to a big worm. And finally, in the Rather Outdoors family, the Strike King, the Lures, and the Mach line of products, we have a big worm. It is the Mach Mega. All the YouTubers at Mach, we kind of put our brains together and design these soft plastics. We are really excited about this worm right here. It is, I believe, 8.38 inches. Let me check. Yes, it is 8.3 inches. That is for Juan Carlos, aka Senor Bass's favorite Bible verse, Romans 8:3. It could be Romans 8:38. Either way, both good verses. And that was an awesome thing that Mach let us do, is have our own personalizations. But that aside, this is an awesome worm for fishing around deeper water. So I say 10 plus feet of water, especially around rocks or drop-offs or grass edges, specifically brush. I fish a big worm. And personally, I don't think there's a better worm color for deeper water, again, where the visibility is less, than either June bug or blue flake. I don't exactly know what the color that we call this Mach worm is. I'll have it listed down below. At least as far as the Berkeley Power worm goes, it was blue fleck. I just love this color of worm right here. It gets bit for me. And if you are struggling with catching fish when they move out deep, especially when you're past the good early morning feed window where the bass are hitting top water and reaction baits and vibrating jigs and a fluke worked really fast, those fish don't stay shallow all day long, especially in ponds with hardly any structure or cover or shade on the bank. They get out deep, and if you're in the mid-depth, I throw the 6-inch Ocho, like the 5 foot to 10 foot. But if you're deeper than that, I put a big old 4-aught or 5-aught worm hook on this thing with a 3/16 to maybe 1/4 ounce weight and drag this sucker around, and you'll catch some big pond bass. But I did just talk about the shallow soft plastic fishing, and when it comes to this time of year, the bluegills in your bodies of water are usually spawning. If you walk the banks, you can see little craters that bluegills make, and bass are absolute terrors around bluegill beds, and they are hanging around those all late spring and early summertime. And the Strike King caffeine shad, specifically my favorite being the 4-inch, the smaller one, is a fantastic soft plastic for this time of year. Again, this one rigged Texas style and rigged weightless. I am hardly ever putting a weight, at least not a nose weight, sometimes a belly weight, but I would rather go weightless 9 times out of 10 because I'm fishing this lure right here in less than 5 feet of water. In the last soft plastic that I actually have right here on one of Alton Jr.'s rods, again, I'm here in North Carolina filming the Stage 5 event of the Bass Pro Tour, so I'm borrowing some of Alton's combos here, is going to be a soft plastic swim bait. And again, if you are in a pond that has extra clean water and nothing really to get snagged on, no snot grass, you can go with a flashy swimmer, is what it's called. It's a hook type that has a blade on the bottom and it's belly weighted. But if you have that filamentous algae in your body of water, you do not want that blade unless you keep it high enough in the water column, because it will get bogged down and it won't look natural. You're gonna want a swim bait hook that does not have a blade on the bottom, and so I'll have a blade version and a non-blade version, along with what size hook to throw with what size swim bait. That can get complicated. I will leave that down in the video description. But when it comes to covering water with a soft plastic, again, maybe you don't want to throw a spinner bait or a vibrating jig or a faster, harder moving bait, a crankbait. The swim bait is a great way to cover water and catch plenty of fish this time of year. So soft plastics are going away. Let's talk about category number 3 for this time of the year, and that is reaction baits. And I've got 2 of them for you guys, being the vibrating jig and the spinnerbait. Specifically, an all-white vibrating jig or a green pumpkin, or just some kind of white chartreuse variation of a spinnerbait. Now, maybe these results are skewed because I throw it more often, but at least in my experience, 90% of my reaction bait style bass in this time of the year come on a vibrating jig. This here is the Strike King Tungsten Thunder Cricket in either a green pumpkin or an all-white, depending on what the fish are eating in your body of water. So it could be bait fish, throw the white. If it is, or really dirty water, throw the white. And if it's bluegill or I guess ponds don't have gobies, small perch, sunfish, whatever, throw a green pumpkin, maybe with a little bit of chartreuse on there as well. And not to say the spinnerbait can't work in many conditions, but I've just found the spinnerbait is better for really, really windy conditions, especially in shallower water. A spinnerbait having a kind of a bulked out skirt and 2 blades, it's just an overall bigger presence in the water. It falls a lot slower in the water column, and so you cannot fish this thing as effectively in deeper water. It'll rise in the water column. And a vibrating jig, especially a tungsten version, you can actually keep down in the water column, and so you can fish this thing almost like a lipless crankbait in the winter and pre-spawn. It's a lot more depth variable. That is why I love this thing during this time of the year, because whether the fish are in 1 foot of water or 7 feet of water, I can catch them on practically the same size, the same weight vibrating jig. I can't do that as well on the same weight of spinnerbait. And if you don't throw a vibrating jig a whole lot, or you lack confidence in it, I have a vibrating jig masterclass that I will link down in the video description. It's a magical place down there. Check it out. And those are my lures for this time of year, but I want to talk about real quick a few lures that I kind of stay away from for the most part, especially in ponds like you guys have and I have, that have tons of stuff to get snagged on. Let's talk about those real quick. The first of which being any style of crankbait. If you have a clean bottom pond, yes, you can throw a crankbait, and if you want to keep it high enough in the water column where it doesn't get snagged, you absolutely can, and it catches fish. But for the most part, even ponds that are relatively clean will have tons of algae growing along the immediate edge where you're standing. And so if you are not lifting your rod tip to kind of take your lure out of the water before you go to make your next cast, you're going to end up snagging tons of that stuff on your treble hooks. And not only does it not look natural to a fish, and they most of the time will not eat it with the algae on there, it is just a hassle to get off. It's hard to pick it off of there, as opposed to leaves or normal healthy vegetation. That snot grass is a pain. So if you love chunking and winding a lure fast, bringing it back to you, catching fish that way, I would recommend a spinnerbait or a vibrating jig, because you can keep them higher in the water column. Maybe you can get away with a lipless crankbait, but for the most part, I am fishing 0 crankbaits during this time of the year, unless I'm fishing a pond that is extra clean. Now, the second lure, and one that I absolutely love almost all year round, is going to be a jig. And you're probably going, huh, you don't like a jig during this time of year? Yes, I do. If you've got good wood that's not too snaggy, a healthy vegetation, or a clean bottom, I throw a jig. As a matter of fact, I hardly ever don't have one tied on. But if you've got that nasty snot stuff, going weightless with your soft plastics or hardly weighted is going to be better than fishing a jig. That heavy head on a jig, even like a 3/8 ounce, just tends to catch some stuff, and so I would rather be less snagged and fish a lure that I have a little less confidence in, because I am ultra confident in a jig, but for the most part, I am not throwing a jig from the bank during this time of year, like I said, except for the exceptions. And the last lure that I don't actually have rigged right now is going to be a drop shot. Now, the big exception here is that, yes, a drop shot is actually fantastic for fishing around that kind of algae. It keeps your lure and your hook that a fish is biting away from that stuff. But during this time of the year, you can usually catch them on a lot more fun techniques than a drop shot. Now, if a drop shot is the way you're getting bit and catching the fish is fun, by all means throw a drop shot. I will as well. But if I can catch them on a topwater, specifically a frog or a vibrating jig or a spinnerbait or a swim bait like this, I would much rather do that. And so a drop shot for me is kind of a last resort. Now, this time of the year in a boat, a drop shot is one of the best lures to catch fish and get bit, and sometimes the faster, more fun lures are not getting bit. So again, people ask me all the time, Tyler, what's the best lure for bass fishing? The best lure is the one the fish are biting, and sometimes that's the drop shot. But in our ponds and lakes that you're bank fishing this time of the year, oftentimes other lures that are more fun are getting bit, so save the drop shot until you absolutely need to. As I've been sitting here in North Carolina, I've had the pond that I've fished here behind our Airbnb behind me the whole time, and it's calling my name. So I'm gonna head down to the pond, use some of those lures to catch fish and make a 100 Ponds episode. But thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. If you wanna see my 100 Pond series that I'm mentioning, I will leave it up here in this corner. My name's Tyler. Make sure y'all check out the links down in the video description, and I'll see you guys next time right here on TRF. Fire ant on me. There's a fire ant. Gosh dang it. There's bugs all over.